This afternoon, we're going to hear from our leaders from the Department of Transportation. This is one of my favorite sessions, actually. We get to beat up on FTA. First up is FTA Acting Administrator Therese McMillan. Therese is representing Secretary of Transportation Anthony Fox today, who could not be with us. She will also speak specifically about FTA's initiatives for 2015. Therese joined FTA as Deputy Administrator on July 9th, 2009. She has assisted the Administrator in leading a staff of more than 500 in the Washington, D.C. headquarters office and 10 regional offices throughout the United States. With the passage of MAP 21, she assumed a key role in guiding FTA's implementation of transit-related provisions in the law and overseeing the development of critical guidance. She has also played an integral leadership role in advancing several critical FTA priorities to improve the quality and delivery of transit services in the American public, including assisting in the development of a streamlined process for the new and small starts program and securing new funding opportunities for state of good repair of transit assets. She took the lead in working with FTA staff across the country to ensure the timely, accurate allocation of $8.78 billion for 1,072 Recovery Act grants. And she also represented federal transit interests in the Partnership for Sustainable Communities with fellow DOT colleagues, EPA and HUD. Please help me welcome Acting Administrator McMillan.
Thank you, and it is great to be with you again. As you know, Secretary Fox planned on being here today, and the only reason he didn't is because he's having surgery on his knee. I'm sure if he was here, he'd be the first to point out that irony, that like our infrastructure, all of us are getting older and in need of repair from time to time. There was one very important message, however, he wanted to be with you today to share, and that is to thank each of you for coming to Washington and to visit with your members of Congress. He's been to the Hill many times himself over the past year, and he's worked hard to share with lawmakers the stark facts and a sense of urgency. He's explained how we're investing much less than we should be in transportation, and he's warned that because of that disinvestment, we've fallen behind on repairs, something we have to address even as we plan for the new capacity we must have for growing demand. But these same arguments carry so much more weight when they come from you. You are able to speak in concrete terms about communities that are struggling to stay on the move, large ones and small ones, urban and rural, red and blue. That context matters. When states like Arkansas and Tennessee and Delaware speak up and say they're postponing billions of dollars worth of projects, it demonstrates in bold terms what the uncertainty of short-term measures is costing us. And it's up to each of us out there to convince our elected leaders that America's future growth and prosperity depend on the decisions that they will be making in the weeks ahead. Working shoulder to shoulder with local business leaders, you are in the best position to tell your own story and to make it clear how important public transportation is in your community. So now I want you to imagine that you had the opportunity to write a postcard to yourself and send it back 30 years in the past. What would it say? Maybe on the front side, you would send a picture of your family as an encouragement to your past self. I really can be successful. Maybe you send a warning of the troubles we faced as a nation. Or maybe you would advise your 1985 self to invest in Microsoft, Look out for a company called Google, and don't count Apple out just yet. There's this thing called an iPhone. Well, we've already received our postcard from 30 years in our future. And on the front, it shows broad highways full of cars at a standstill and trucks full of goods going nowhere. It shows a nation with 25% more people and an inability to connect them to jobs, education, and healthcare. It shows bridges that have fallen with tragic results. And on the back, it simply says, invest in transportation. So why are we getting such a pessimistic postcard from our future selves? And will we follow the advice that it holds? Now, you have to understand that the future America is a much more crowded place. Our nation could grow by as much as 25% over the next 30 years, adding more than 70 million people. Pick any highway, bus, rail car at rush hour in almost any city in America today, and you tell me if you can squeeze in 25% more people. Americans are already spending 5 days a week in traffic. In New York City, a record number of riders on an aging subway system has already resulted in a greater number of overcrowding delays. In fact, in December, there were more than twice as many delays as just the year before. And this is not only a problem for our big cities. Some of the fastest growing areas in the U.S. are places like Frisco, Texas, South Jordan, Utah, Gaithersburg, Maryland, and Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. In the town of San Marcos, Texas, they saw an 8% growth rate from 2012 to 2013, making it the fastest growing city in the nation with more than 50,000 people. And we are not talking about a tech hub or a wealthy oil town. In fact, the median household income is $26,000 in San Marcos. That is far below the average for the state of Texas. While the population in cities like these are growing, nationwide, the number of people 65 and older will more than double over the next 50 years. And when the AARP asked older Americans what amenity they most wanted close to home, the number one answer was a bus stop. Not a pharmacy. It was more important than a grocery store. It's how important their mobility and independence are to those seniors. What that postcard from the future is trying to tell us is that we will not be able to accommodate that kind of demand, driven by change and growth, unless we invest in transportation today, and specifically public transport. Of course, more people also means more people trying to get to work. And because this is America, it also means more people starting and growing businesses, and they will need to connect to workers. A very recent example. When the big blizzard in January shut down Boston's public transportation, Massachusetts General Hospital had a real problem. According to the hospital, nearly half of their employees take public transit. So in the midst of this very dangerous storm, they were literally working overtime to make sure they could get enough staff on every shift to serve their patients. And that's a situation that is not as unique as it sounds. In Atlanta, a university study looked at more than 50 industry sectors that make up the region's economy. And it found that 14 of the 18 fastest growing sectors are among those whose workers rely heavily on local transit services to get to and from work. So although Atlanta doesn't suffer from many nor'easters, any long-term disruption to its public transportation system would seriously throttle that region's ability to grow. Nationwide, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, 4 of the 5 projected fastest growing jobs pay wages of less than $27,000 a year, We're talking about retail salespersons, home health aides, personal care aides, general office clerks, many of whom rely on public transport. And the reason our future selves are such Debbie Downers is that at the rate we're going today, we are not going to be able to keep up. In fact, decades of disinvestment are going to make our job even harder. If there's one thing that people in this town can agree on, it's that our national infrastructure is in a woeful state of disrepair. The most recent report card from the American Society of Civil Engineers gave the nation's bridges a C+, our road and transits a D, and our levees a D-. These grades aren't improving. In transit systems nationwide, as you all well know, we have an $87 billion backlog in repairs that's estimated to grow by over $2 billion a year. Your elected leaders are aware of this fact, and if they somehow missed it before, Secretary Fox has recently traveled through many of their communities on a big blue bus to call attention to it. His message was very clear and it's very simple. We need to do something now, and we need to do something big. To these urgent reasons to invest, let's add another: the health and well-being of our communities and their people. Later this week, FTA is hosting a conversation called Rides to Wellness that aims to improve cooperation and coordination among transit, healthcare, and social service providers. We will be joined by representatives from Health and Human Services and the U.S. Department of Agriculture as part of our ongoing efforts to work together more effectively on behalf of the people we serve. With more Americans covered by health insurance, it is important that they're able to access preventive care and regular checkups at the doctor's instead of in an emergency room. For instance, there are 15 free screenings that are provided by law, and this is fantastic, but it can be really hard to convince someone to go to the doctor before something is broken or bleeding or hurting them. And that is especially true when they lack reliable transportation to get there. 80% of Medicaid's healthcare costs are attributable to chronic diseases that could be better managed with more frequent care. But you have to get there. Improving access to health care and doing it in a more coordinated way is going to be a growing challenge, particularly in rural areas that lack transportation options. So as you speak to elected leaders about the urgent need to invest in transit, remind them that you not only connect people to jobs and education, but you also connect them to vital services like healthcare. So with so many compelling reasons to invest in our nation's transportation infrastructure, the only question seems to remain is how can we possibly afford to fix this all? But I submit to you today that the real question we should be asking is how can we possibly afford not to? And as Secretary Fox likes to ask, if figuring out how to provide for the future is going to be so difficult, shouldn't we make it worth it by going for something big instead of something half-measure? This administration's answer is the Grow America Act, and you've heard a lot about it in the year since it was introduced. We will be building and expanding on our proposal this year, and the President's proposed budget for fiscal year 16 is a good indication of where we're headed. As the Secretary has mentioned, it includes 6 years of funding for transportation, totaling $478 billion. FTA's share for fiscal year 16 is $18.4 billion, an increase of 67% over current funding. By the 6th year, it would grow to 76% higher than current funding for a 6-year total of $115 billion over the proposed authorization period. The FY16 budget for FTA includes a record $3.2 billion for our capital investment grant program, better known as New Starts and Small Starts. It would also increase the bus and bus facilities program dramatically, providing more funding for state of good repair, reintroducing the new rapid growth area bus rapid transit initiative, which would provide $500 million for new BRT service. These aren't programs that we just made up out of thin air. They're in response to what we have heard from you in terms of what your customers want. And because the transit industry is changing along with the rest of the nation, we want to make major investments in workforce development to build the skills and train the personnel that we are going to need for the future. If much of this sounds familiar, and it should, it's because by the time the latest short-term measure expires in May, the Grow America proposal will be 1 year old. And yet here we are, having the same conversations and staring down the same decisions. It's clear that not all of us have picked up that postcard from the future and turned it over to see what it says. That's why it's up to you to deliver the message. I know what Secretary Fox would have asked of you today, to tell the truth, the unadulterated, unvarnished, unambiguous truth. Tell Congress about the many good projects that are stalled, the ones that would create jobs and ease congestion and bring us in to the 21st century in a bold way. A postcard today can take many forms, though I still like getting the old-fashioned kind on a paper with a stamp. It can be a knock on a door, it can be an email, it can be a tweet. For the younger generation, maybe it's a post to Instagram with a picture of stalled traffic or an overcrowded rail platform or a picture of someone they love boarding a paratransit van to go to dialysis. The bottom line is that the message has to be seen, it has to be heard, and it has to be acted on. Let's go out and do it. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Administrator McMillan. Now I want to turn the program over to our session moderator, Diana Mendez, Senior Vice President and Director of America's Transit at AECOM. Diana, please.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome, and thank you very much, Acting Administrator McMillan, for communicating the message from Secretary Fox and the update from FTA. Please do send Secretary Fox all of our well wishes from APTA, and we wish him a speedy recovery. I'm Diana Mendez, as Phil mentioned, and I'm delighted to be your moderator today, where we'll be having a very lively and interesting discussion with both the Federal Transit Administration and the Federal Railroad Administration. So now joining Acting Administrator McMillan, we also will be hearing from Sarah Feinberg, Acting Administrator of the FRA, who joined the administration on January 9th, 2015. In this capacity, she manages a $20 billion rail investment portfolio and helps develop and enforce rail safety regulations and oversees research and technology development programs. Prior to coming to the FRA, Ms. Feinberg served as Chief of Staff to the Secretary of Transportation, providing strategic advice and counsel regarding operational and legislative initiatives across all modes of transportation. Now updating us about the major goals and initiatives of the Federal Railroad Administration, we'll turn to Ms. Feinberg. Please join me in welcoming her.
Good afternoon. It is such a pleasure to be here today with my colleague and friend Therese McMillan. You know, in my old role as the Chief of Staff for Secretary Fox, I always appreciated the commitment that this organization shares with the administration's goal of making our national transportation network safer, more interconnected, more reliable, and more efficient. To your President, Michael Milanofi, your board, your members and staff, thank you for your partnership and support over the years. I am so honored to be here with you today, as there are no greater friends to the Department of Transportation. Now, I'm a pretty frank person, so let me get right to my main points, and then we'll get to the moderated conversation. Today, I want to spend our time talking first about safety and the importance of bringing a fresh perspective and new thinking to some old problems, and then about rail and surface reauthorization and the incredibly important opportunities we see there. But first, safety. As all of you know, and much to the credit of the people sitting in this room, over the last decade, total train accidents are down. Derailments are down. Highway grade crossing incidents have declined. The rail industry, in many ways, is safer than it has ever been in history. That is all good news, and all of you deserve great credit for these improvements. But most recently, some of those numbers look to be ticking up on us again. Over the last year, the number of incidents at grade crossings increased by 9%, and the number of fatalities at grade crossings increased by 16%. And while this next figure is less of an issue for the commuter rails to worry about, just this morning, the Wall Street Journal reported on FRA data showing the number of fiery and violent rupture accidents also on the rise. So my point is this. Those most recent statistics alone serve as a stark reminder that our work is not done. We still have a long way to go to get to 0 accidents, 0 injuries, and 0 fatalities. You know, just 2 weeks into my new job at the FRA, a grade crossing accident occurred in New York, killing 6 people and injuring 15. 3 weeks later, another passenger rail grade crossing accident occurred in California, and a Metrolink crew member died, and 27 other passengers were injured. Stark and painful reminders that we have a ways to go to make grade crossings safer. And I will add, we have news of another grade crossing incident just an hour ago in North Carolina, so we're hopeful that that will be less dramatic and that everyone there is well. So that's just one reason why safety is the centerpiece of the administration's rail reauthorization proposal. But in addition to our own legislative proposals, we have to take independent actions as well. Just because a problem is an old problem, maybe one we think will never be fully solved, doesn't mean we shouldn't give it a fresh look and ask ourselves, what more can we be doing? Following the Metro North grade crossing incident, I immediately asked our FRA staff, men and women who have literally dedicated their entire careers to keeping people safe at or near crossings, to take a fresh look at how we approach safety. Last week, I called upon law enforcement agencies to step up more patrols at grade crossings, to increase their efforts to write citations to drivers who don't obey the rules of the road, and to immediately begin employing best practices to better safeguard our communities. In the coming weeks, we will have more to announce about increasing public awareness about grade crossing dangers, about how to better employ technology, and how we might be able to increase funding to assist local communities that want to improve safety features at crossings. Other than the friends and families of grade crossing victims, of course, no one understands the pain of these incidents quite like the train crews and operators. These incidents are truly devastating for everyone, and we shouldn't lose sight of the price that so many of your own colleagues have paid. As we have said on so many other safety items over the years, we look forward to working with all of you, partnering with you to continue to bring down the numbers of injuries and deaths. But on to reauthorization. You know, there's a lot of talk in Washington right now about getting a rail and surface reauthorization done this session, and we are so encouraged by that progress. Few things could be more important or more valuable use of the Congress's time. The fact that the House of Representatives took an important first step just last week in adopting a rail reauthorization measure is a huge sign of momentum. And I congratulate Chairman Schuster and everyone who worked so closely with him and his staff to get that bill done. But we need to do more. We need a comprehensive rail reauthorization package that includes funding and safety provisions like assistance to commuter railroads to implement PTC. As this process moves ahead, we look forward to working with both chambers of Congress as they craft a measure that builds, sustains, and enhances a safe and reliable rail network for both passenger and freight rail service. We are their ready partner, and we will do anything in our power to assist them in moving a package forward. After all, we have a lot at stake here. As you just heard Therese so eloquently say, our Grow America proposal, a 6-year transportation funding bill, would give states the funding certainty they need to bridge the nation's infrastructure gap. As all of you know, rail is unique when compared to other modes of transportation in that it lacks a committed source of federal revenue. Grow America will provide predictable, dedicated funding for rail with the establishment of a rail account in a new transportation trust fund. For the rail industry, Grow America means a $29 billion investment over 6 years to improve rail safety and invest in a national high-performance rail system. The Act also builds on current investments to vastly improve the system in areas ranging from PTC implementation to enhancing flexibility in financing programs that will better enable the rehabilitation of aging infrastructure. Grow America would make changes to improve existing programs. Among other topics, the Act would enhance the RIF program, making it more accessible and flexible for borrowers. Revamp Amtrak's planning process to address immediate and long-term goals, such as addressing the backlog of state of good repair needs. Advance safety research by focusing on risk reduction and new equipment testing. Assist the railroad industry in implementing PTC as the backbone of the next generation of rail safety. Grow America would also create new programs that will focus on both current passenger rail service and the development of future passenger rail service. These programs include the establishment of new Amtrak grants that would provide a longer-term view of maintaining passenger rail assets and services in good working condition. The Rail Service Improvement Program, which will provide competitive grants to drive development of high-performing passenger rail networks. This program also includes funding for PTC implementation for commuter railroads and support for states and localities to mitigate the adverse impacts of rail operations in their communities through grade crossing improvements and rail line relocation efforts. Simply put, Grow America is our blueprint for beginning to close rail's infrastructure gap and to setting the table for the next generation of safety. These are forward-thinking, large-scale improvements that come with some extremely important byproducts: the creation of good-paying jobs and the strengthening of our national economy. And bridging our nation's infrastructure gap gets more important with every passing day of inaction. It's no secret that our aging infrastructure and the gaps that exist in our transportation system must be dealt with, and soon. Congress is aware of these needs, but only Congress can act on them by passing Grow America. I believe Congress will ultimately take action, but it's up to all of you to make sure that Congress gets it right. We must build on the proposal put forward by the House in order to see a comprehensive rail reauthorization bill enacted that would address rail safety, benefit our freight partners and other modes of transportation, continue to support the successes of our intercity passenger rail networks, and provide the resources and predictable, dedicated funding to both address our backlog and make the improvements required to meet the passenger and freight mobility needs of our growing population. We will all benefit from a comprehensive bill. Rehabilitating our aging infrastructure simply cannot wait any longer. Thank you, and I look forward to working with all of you and taking your questions.
Well, thank you, Ms. Feinberg, for your remarks, and certainly both of you gave us very inspirational and insightful speeches, but certainly clearly communicated that it's up to all of us to make the future successful. So we're going to take some questions from the floor, but before we do that, I'd like to start out just talking about funding and financing. Obviously, demands increasing and funding and financing is becoming more and more challenging. So one strategy to address potential long-term financing involves public-private partnerships. And I'm just curious what you see as some of the great success stories and what advice you might have for those seeking public-private partnerships.
Sure, I'm happy to go. Am I
Yeah,
on? Okay.
you're on.
Okay, good. So I think you're exactly right. Public-private partnerships we're seeing increasing numbers of them all the time. I think what Secretary Fox and the President have both said, which I think is really important, is that it is part of the answer, but it is not the answer. So I do not want to take public and private partnerships as the reason why Congress does not have to pass a big comprehensive bill. It needs to just, but that's fine for them to supplement a bill. It's certainly one path forward, but I hesitate to put too many eggs in that basket. We still need a big bill.
I think the other thing to think about too is certainly we want to broaden our sense about what effective private sector participation is in the transit industry. So for example, a lot has been turned to transit-oriented development, but capturing the value of that development for transit, I think is a very important and very rich area to build a good relationship with the private sector, because not only in the more common way where you may get contributions toward the construction of the project, what about capturing that ongoing value for ongoing operations and maintenance? So we've been working closely with a number of our agencies. There's a lot of creative work that's going on out in the industry right now. We want to bundle that up and see if there's a more aggressive way that we can encourage that type of partnerships in bringing the private sector forward.
Great. So the Federal Railroad Administration has been working on a number of improvements to the Railroad Rehabilitation and Improvement Financing Program. Can you share with us?
It needed a lot of improvements.
And we're happy to see them advancing. Can you share with us
Yes.
some of the improvements that you see?
Yes, so we are very focused on this. First, I give Secretary Fox a lot of credit. He has said that one of his priorities is that by the time he walks out the door on January, 20th, 2017, that he would like that account to be at zero. Which means we have about $35 billion to loan out, which, if anybody knows how loan programs work, is going to be difficult, but it's a very good challenge to have. So we're doing a couple things. One, we are trying to think more creatively about potential applicants. I think we may have been a little narrow in our view of the right applicants for this program previously. So, you know, whether it's the mayor of New Haven who wants to come in and talk about what Union Station in New Haven needs, or whether it's, you know, Rahm Emanuel wanting to talk about Chicago Union Station, or even, you know, the potential for some ability to stabilize crude before it gets placed into transport in the Bakken, I think we would be open to all of that. So, so we're much more creative in thinking about who the right applicants would be. And we're also just trying to move faster. You know, this administration has to walk a fine line between trying very hard to assist those who are going to make infrastructure improvements and build new infrastructure projects, but also obviously being incredibly careful with taxpayer dollars and making sure that all of that money is going to get paid back at some point. So while the loan terms are excellent, it's important that that money be able to come back. And so I think it's taken a long time for us to get over some of those bars. So we're also working to be really more efficient about how we help people get through the loan process and get those loans out the door.
Great. So as you're looking and evaluating projects, TIFIA program or railroad investment program, how has the current climate affected how you look at and evaluate projects, and what advice do you have to people to make their projects competitive and attractive for federal investment?
Well, I think certainly for new starts and small starts. We've put, we actually have, statutory criteria we have to examine. So by its own design, there's a number of different factors that we evaluate. I think, though, given the incredible competitiveness of the program, clearly those agencies that are able to leverage the federal dollar well, will be able to play in that pool. And there's another aspect to that that's very important as well. Once you get the project built, you have to run it. And that's not a small issue. I think one of the things that we've seen, and in my conversation just today with a number of different agencies, are stressing the point, as I did in my remarks and what Secretary Fox has said over and over. We have to expand for the growth that we see in the country. We have to be nimble about the types of investments we can pursue. It's not just about heavy rail or light rail, but it is BRT and these other modes. But at the same time, you have to be in a stable enough environment that once that project is done and that full funding grant agreement is concluded, you're able to operate and maintain that system and reinvest in the system over time. So it's really, I think, to be competitive, you need to, I think, demonstrate that you have a handle on that holistic view and that you can convince us as the federal government, as a partner, that you're able to be in there for the long haul.
Great advice and insight. Would you like to add?
I would just
anything?
say that we are invested in trying to make these programs work, and so being in touch with us on the front end, talking through a project, talking through a loan application, talking through the financial audit, all of that, we want to be able to loan this money out, and so we are not going to suggest that you figure it all out on your own and then turn in a big package to us and we'll mark it up and say no thank you and send it back. If you get in touch with us on the front end, then we can work with you and make sure that application's in really great shape so that we can move things along faster.
Great. Thank you for that. So safety, obviously, is at the forefront of all of our minds every day. And I'm sure you have some advice and insights to share with the audience as different safety programs are starting to come online and in advance of the new safety regulations. What would you advise people to think about and get prepared for?
Well, with federal transit, and it's interesting because, Sarah and the FRA have had a federal safety portfolio for a long time. And as all of you know, the great challenge for the Federal Transit Administration is that MAP 21 gave us for the first time significant federal regulatory authority. And so we've been working very closely with the industry. APT has been a great partner trying to get the message out that as we're starting, starting anew really with this new authority, a couple of things are critical. First of all, throughout the DOT, safety is our number one priority. There can't be enough attention to this. But then for transit, our challenge is also recognizing that approaching safety, one size won't fit all in terms of a regulatory framework. That just simply won't happen. And so we've been spending a lot of time explaining and building on what's going to be the centerpiece of our work, which is a safety management system approach, an SMS approach. Used extensively in the aviation industry. FAA has deployed it for some time, being explored by a number of our sister agencies. And again, the thought is that you approach this not as a checklist of all the things you have to get right, but as a risk management approach where you look at the unique circumstances of your operating environment, of your capital environment, of your worker safety environment, and you build a program around your risk management portfolio. So, that's not a concept that's very easy to put on paper in a day and a half by any stretch. And we're working very hard to get all of the various elements through the rulemaking process. to respond to the MAP 21 requirements, and it continues to be top priority for FTA.
So my advice is, I touched on this in my remarks a little bit. We are, when faced with old problems, trying to bring new thinking and a fresh perspective to old problems. So grade crossings is a good example of a very old problem where we've made a ton of progress. And I think, there's some inclination to just say, oh, it's mostly driver error. What are you going to do about someone trying to beat a train? What are you going to do if someone's ultimately a little disoriented at a grade crossing? So we're trying to bring new thinking to that old problem. And I think with new problems, we're trying to bring comprehensive thinking. So the crude by rail issue is a brand new problem. It is a problem that we have because we are becoming an energy independent country, which is wonderful, but not necessarily, I don't think everyone's been thinking about the challenges that come along with energy independence. And so those are issues that we have not been tackling for a long time, particularly in terms of the quantity of a volatile product that's moving throughout the country. So we're trying to think very comprehensively. How do you incentivize industry to make the product safer before it gets placed into transport? How do you incentivize the railroads? How do you put certain expectations in place, such as a zero tolerance policy for anything that happens on a crude route? So comprehensive thinking for new problems and new thinking for old problems.
And that takes all of us at the table to do that in partnership.
And actually, Sarah brings up a point I'd like to reiterate too. We've tried very hard under this administration, and Secretary Fox has, made it a key point in, the Beyond Traffic framework that was put out there. We have to stop thinking about ourselves in just our little modal boxes and as a transportation system. And safety is one area where that really does come to bear. Secretary Fox has done an enormous amount of work emphasizing bicycle and pedestrian safety. Well, as a transit mode, that's really critical for us because a lot of people get to our system walking or biking, or will leave our system walking and biking. Similarly, working with Sarah's world, when you talk about a grade crossing, this is the interface between our particular mode of transit and highway modes, cars, or pedestrians in the case of trespassing and the challenges associated there. So, this whole notion again of a SMS construct is very helpful in getting around this, not only the safety of your mode, but the safety of the system and how it interfaces with other modes as well. So it's an exciting time to be, thinking about safety in these different dimensions.
It is, particularly with the new technologies and the ability to do better analytics to really address the most pressing needs. So I'm sure we have some questions in our audience. I'd like to offer the opportunity for members of the audience to ask their questions. Please let us know who you are and where you're from.
Peter Varga from Grand Rapids, Michigan. Hi, Therese. Thank you for the thought about the postcards. I really like that idea and try to imagine how that works. You mentioned something really good, I thought, about the whole thing about taking photographs and sending them and tweeting them and Instagram and that whole thing and using that whole social media. And so what hashtag should we use? Should we use hashtag stuck in traffic that we used in that conversation? Or which one, so that everybody starts being in the same conversation on that?
Oh, wow. That's a creative question. Maybe we should have a contest, right? And get all your good ideas.
That's a great idea. How about hashtag Grow America?
Yeah, right.
Hashtag stuck in traffic is a good one too.
Hashtag invest now. I mean, there's so many elements.
Hashtag do something already.
Well, and it's right there. But I want to bring up something that Peter stressed so much in your tenure as chair of APTA. How about hashtag it's about people? Because I think a large part of this is it's not an abstract concept. This is about moving the American public and the things that they need to do. And I think in all of our conversations, it is so easy to lose that piece of it. And so, an opportunity to reflect something that is a critical part, I think, of all of our conversations.
I do love that idea of having a contest, though. We should take that back to DOT and have a contest. It reminds me of the contest. We had an internal contest when we were naming Grow America, which at that point, people had been up, all night for months and weeks and were exhausted. And at some point on our way out the door, we'll have to bring out the list of suggested names for that, because it was a race to the bottom, but it was really funny.
Send it back to me and I'll make sure everybody gets it.
Okay, great.
Terrific. Thank you. Yes?
Yeah, hi, I'm Jeff Wharton with Impulse out of North Carolina. My question pertains more towards the workforce and the jobs part. To Acting Administrator McMillan, we know just last week a pilot project came out on geographic hiring preferences. And question I have is if we can get some definition on the local hire as it pertains to rolling stock procurement. As manufacturers, we employ a variety of sub-suppliers all throughout the U.S., and we're just having a little difficulty understanding what the intent is when the geographic hiring pertains to rolling stock procurement. And is it the intent that we're going to be looking at moving factories in order to accommodate the local preference?
The local hire initiative has a couple of elements to it. One is, as you mentioned, is the pilot program. It's very important to remember. It is a pilot program for communities and entities that want to explore, well, and particularly for FHWA and FTA, because we have statutory requirements now for, competitive procurement, is to say, to lift what has been interpreted to be a prohibition on geographic hiring. This is for folks who want to explore what this is about. This is not a mandate that you have to do it, but we want to more systematically explore whether geographic preference does in fact impose constraints on the competitive bidding environment. This is a way of getting experience on the ground with entities that want to pursue these and see how it applies. Given that it is a broad pilot test, we wanted to look not only at construction, but also as procurement. So we don't go in with a specific, the whole point about a pilot program is you to bring your ideas to us, for communities to bring ideas to the Department of Transportation as to how they would want to implement a geographic hiring preference and under what circumstances. And importantly, in the pilot, you are supposed to be able to demonstrate, what your objectives are, how those were met, how the preferences actually did impact the bidding environment that you saw. So we're going to be gathering data based on these pilots. Will be very important. So we're not coming in with a preconceived notion about it. We're actually setting up the pilot to get ideas from local communities.
Thank you. Sir?
I'm Arun Vora with the Mini LLC. You're both absolutely correct. The mantra is safety, reliability, I want to add two more, serviceability and maintainability. Question, for those of us small companies who are in the business of R&D, for example, in the railroad road crossing issue, is there a way for us to get our thoughts over to FRA so we can try to develop some of these ideas and make something that will make those accidents completely avoidable?
So yes, that's a wonderful. So first of all, you can email me at sarah.feinberg@dot.gov because we want ideas on this. But also we have a whole policy and research and development arm of FRA that is constantly helping think about these things. They do human factor research. They do massive amounts of research in Pueblo. They run trains into each other and see what happens. But they also work on these human factors and new technologies that are coming that might help us down the road. So that's all easy to find on our website, but you can also just email me.
Thank you.
This is also, just very quickly, I think Sarah and I will grab as many opportunities as we can to also plug, the work that's being put forward in the Beyond Traffic document. A huge part of that 30-year view is in the whole arena of new technologies and innovation. Secretary Fox has been very blunt in his assessment that the transportation industry is, particularly, in the public sector, we're always chasing innovation, and he wants to have us start thinking about how we can get in front of it and harness technology to the use of what we want to do, rather than constantly sort of being behind the curve. And so a large part of a rethinking, if you will, that document puts forward, certainly for the transportation industry, is this: how do we get ahead and make sure that we are not just doing research for the next technology that might be available in the next couple of years, but in the next 25, next 30 years, and how do we weave that into our planning and development. So not only the immediate things we might be able to put in place, which are critically important, but we also want to have your thoughts about how do we take that more forward view.
Hi, my name is Ben Johnson. I'm from Northern California. I'm with Tri-Delta Transit in Antioch. And my question is twofold. Basically, number one is, if we do not get funding, that's the first thing, is if we don't get this process going and get the funding through the legislature, where are we going to go with the projects anyway? Because if we got 15 that we don't have funding for, and then 16's coming, and then elections coming, and you're going to have all new cabinet members coming in, and et cetera, that's going to create a monster of a problem for a lot of people. And so I think that's my concern. And we talk about, you just made a good point about the curve, of getting ahead of the curve. Well, if you go to China, I've been to China, I've seen their process, I've been to Korea and seen their process, and I can say that looking at those processes, they're ahead of the curve. They planned it, especially in Japan. I noticed in Japan, they were really ahead of the curve because they had all the high-speed rail, and so did China. But China had a few problems with theirs. But my concern, I guess, answering the question is if we have shovel-ready programs already ready, how do we get them up to the top of the list? Because sometimes I see that they don't get to the top of the list. And so what can we do as an agency, being APTA, or our own local agencies, to move those projects up to be up there on top, to get them done and get the funding to be able to do them? We have a project now that the governor in California just approved, the high-speed rail project. Well, it still needs the funding to get it finished, and if it doesn't have the funding, it's going to sit out there in the middle of nowhere and just sit there, and we can't get it done. And it's an important project because it will show what in the United States, what high-speed rail will do. And we just need to move forward and get those up, and maybe you can give me some ideas of how I can bring it back to the people in California to figure out how we can do that.
Right. Well, a couple points. One, I think the good news is we have a couple things going for us, first of all, at the moment. One is that even though it feels like bad news that the surface transportation, that the Highway Trust Fund is going to run out in May, it also means that something has to be done, right?
Sure.
We have not yet gotten to a world where the Congress is actually so dysfunctional they're not going to at least extend it, right? So what we need is a big bill, but something will be done before May. And I have been in the very uncomfortable spot of looking at my watch thinking, okay, you've got 5 days, you've got 7 days, how much money are we going to make it? But something will have to be done. So that's a vehicle, first of all, for something big to be done. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, it's important to, exactly as you said, be really efficient with your projects, get them started. I don't think any member of Congress, Republican, Democrat, Tea Party, Liberal, whatever, no member of Congress wants to be in a position where you've started a project, you've obligated funds, and then we can't continue with the project. Doesn't matter who's in the White House, it doesn't matter who's in charge of the Congress. You don't want to have to take obligated funds and try to deal with them afterwards, and you don't want to have a stranded asset, right? True. And so I think that's going for us, but you need to make as much progress as you possibly can so that when this administration leaves, there's an effort to continue those projects in the next administration. And the other good news I think we have going for us is that infrastructure and transportation has always historically been topics, issues that bring parties together. And so it's one of the few things, even in this very partisan political moment that we're in, that's likely to get worse as we head into a presidential election cycle. It's one of the few things that usually brings people together. And so it's less likely to be affected than everything else. So.
Yeah. And I just have one other question in regards to rail, and that has to be with the process of getting for instance, our major process right now is moving the rail through the cities. And I happen to be one of the cities that we're moving it in. We're looking to actually have a facility in our city. But the problem is our communities are, because of all the problems that they've had and the crashes, as you mentioned before, that are up, is how do we appease the people of the community, or what would be an idea for you to give to us to appease those people and get them on another level to where we could actually do this? I know that there's issues with rails not being level, and there's a lot of issues out there for maintenance, and that's an issue with financing. And so how do we get the financing or how do we get the rail people to listen to what we have to say? Because I think that's probably the worst thing I've seen dealing with the rail. You get them to come to try to get them to come to your city to talk about what they're planning and how they're doing it. I noticed Union Pacific just recently has been giving a big boom of how good they are on the TV. And I'm hoping that we can figure out a way to get that together, because, when people march and it doesn't do any good to march and stand in front of the trains, we talk about incidents. That's how they get created. So I just, it's important to me as a public official, besides being on a board, to figure out how to help my city and the transportation industry at the same time.
Right. How can communities and railroads get along better? Right?
Well, yeah,
it's an age-old question, right? Everybody should be good neighbors to each other. But look, I think it's important to remind communities that those kinds of resources will tend to make their lives better, easier, more efficient, help them take care of their families. It's really important to remind the folks coming in that, the community is supposed to be their partner, not just, someplace they blow by at 70 miles an hour and wake up everybody in the middle of the night with a horn. And so, I don't know. I feel like I'm giving political advice, but I guess to the extent that I'm giving political advice to both sides, I'd say be good to each other, be good neighbors, and if it gets really bad, call us and we'll try to bring everybody together.
Yeah, but it's easier said than done.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Always challenging. Yes.
Hi, I'm Lisa Waltrank with Sound Transit in Seattle, and we've had a few projects that had FTA, FHWA, and FRA oversight on the same project, and some of the compliance issues got a little complex, and I, for one, got a little confused. Are there any efforts going on to kind of simplify or coordinate compliance issues across the modes?
Yes. And we use the term harmonization. There's actually been a number of areas where coordination of programs and or oversight between the modes has helped. I'm very familiar with the circumstance that you're working on, and frankly, any particular project will have its own circumstances, and in this case, we had FHWA and FTA, up through, Washington leadership working to figure out a way to deal with that circumstance. There's been a lot of discussion, for example, between FTA and FRA in terms of better coordinating our NEPA reviews and requirements for projects where there will be a freight element and a passenger rail element, and the project, it serves both, and we need to be able to ensure that we're not making people do things twice. And so, again, certainly on a case-by-case basis, we've tried to anticipate that. And as Sarah had said, early intervention is much more helpful than getting down, toward the end. So that also involves working in partnership with the project sponsor to make sure that we coordinate up front as well as we can. But beyond that, there's been, I think, a lot of focus generally on streamlining. That was a major focus in MAP 21. It continues to be a focus under the GROW proposal, Grow America proposal. So without going into a lot of specifics that I don't have in front of me here, it does continue to be an important element and a theme that both Secretary Fox and Deputy Secretary Victor Mendez deliver to us in the modes on a frequent basis to do as much as we can with the authorities that exist and also pursue things going forward, should they need statutory change.
What's very interesting about those streamlining initiatives is the common theme that it is up to all of us to make that happen. It's not for a federal agency to have to sort out, yes, there needs to be a statutory framework and a consciousness and awareness of partnership, but at the end of the day, the project sponsor, the community, all do need to come together. So very consistent with your messages and your remarks. Yes?
Thank you. I'm Jackie DuPont Walker, board member, LA County. In case anyone doesn't know, that's California. I really want to thank you both for the updates today. And in LA County, we have a high percentage of unemployment and underemployment that impacts the areas, particularly when some of our projects are actually under construction, the light rail. We're very excited then about the innovative public transportation workforce development program that has come out. And so, Ms. McMillan, could you share under the Ladders of Opportunity grant a timeline for awarding those, because it would be extremely important for the neighborhoods and communities in which we're doing the work to see more immediate benefit if we can actually create those apprenticeship opportunities. And we have the strong support of our unions now and a lot of partnerships, and it's been frustrating to try to provide those opportunities quickly. And so if we knew this was coming, we could be prepared. Lots of staff members are here today. They could go back ready, assuming we're going to be one of those grant awardees.
Well, as much as I'd like to, I can't give you a definitive timeline, in large part because what we have been seeing, and this is the dilemma that we have with any discretionary program, we have so many more. First of all, we have an increasingly and unabating interest in our discretionary programs, no matter what it's for. We are always oversubscribed. Just throw some examples out. I think the Tiger program has been oversubscribed 6 to 7 times every single year. When we had our Ladders of Opportunity bus program, we had 14 times more requests than we had money available. And similarly with our workforce, we're a product of, to some degree, our own success. By pressing workforce needs, every year we put out a new workforce grant, we get more and more applications. But, your point is very well taken, that these efforts are only useful to the degree you can get them out, as soon as we can. So we will be, putting great attention to evaluating the projects, and like you, want to see them get on the ground as soon as possible.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Wendy Wakama. I'm with the British Consulate based in New York. My question has to do with public-private partnerships, and I agree with the comment that PPPs are not a silver bullet, but given the scale of investment that this country needs in its infrastructure, certainly it has to be a key piece of the puzzle. Now, last year, the President announced the Build America Initiative, led by Secretary Lew and Secretary Fox, and one of the main priorities was to work with state and local governments and educate them with regards to P3s, because in many cases they're negotiating with the private sector and they don't necessarily have the expertise. Given that some of these projects are once in a lifetime, it's very important that at the federal level we're able to provide a center of excellence where we can work with our state and local governments, to get them educated, to get them to understand, where P3s might be helpful, where it might be useful. And so I just wondered if there is sort of an update on how that work is coming and any visions or ambitions you have for working with our state and local governments.
So you're exactly right. The President, Secretary Liu, Secretary Fox announced that last year. It is in the process of being implemented and stood up. I think ultimately it's going to live at the Department of Transportation. The goal would be to sort of act as almost a concierge service to potential projects, both with streamlining and assisting and getting them moving quickly and helping people understand the process and the deal making and providing some expertise for towns, entities. And it's actually moving along quite well and starting to staff up. And I don't think we've got a ton to say about it. No particular announcements today, but it was not one of those announcements that sort of happened and went off into the ether and then we all forgot about it. It's underway and getting worked on all the time. So.
Yes, I'm John Wetmore with pedestrians.org. You talked about the issues of pedestrian safety, getting the passengers to the bus stop. The transit agency owns the bus, might own the signpost at the bus stop. Then you're dealing with, it might be a county road, it might be a state road. How do these pedestrian safety initiatives work across all these different agencies and levels of government?
It works probably as differently in every community as, it exists. One of the things that as I mentioned, is a major initiative being overseen by the Secretary's Office of Policy, is the bike safety initiative, and also the Secretary launched the Mayor's Challenge for bike and pedestrian safety. And there's a number of, and I'm going to speak to this in broad terms because I don't have all the details, and you can find them on the website. There's a number of bike and pedestrian safety challenges that are going on across the country. And the idea is to select a community and, in fact, to your point, do a deeper dive into a particular safety challenge, whether it be in a very busy intersection where you're trying to access, say, a major transportation, in our case, a major transit station, or it could be a corridor where there's been a high incidence of bike accidents in the past or whatnot, and begin to work with the community. So FHWA or FTA would be sort of a lead agency, but coordinating with the local community to identify the nature of the problem and the array of solutions that could be brought to bear. And I know a key point of all of that is the coordination between the various entities that need to be involved to bring it together. One of the reasons why, again, the safety management system approach, I think, is going to be so valuable for our transit agencies in terms of safety is that you need to ask the question, for my system, how important is the connection with pedestrian interface? Do I have a number of, is this a centerpiece, say, for my new bike network that I'm building in my community, because I'm actually encouraging lots of people to come to my station in bikes, and therefore who would I work with at the Public Works Department in the jurisdiction where I am to ensure that the right, lighting or fixtures or something are in place. So I think all of that is to say we're recognizing it's a very dynamic and very sort of case-specific area. Like so much of what we need to do, there's not a blanket, here's the format that I need to fill out to make these things work. So, I think you just highlighted in your question the actual, challenge that we're facing is that as much of this as might be a technological or engineering fix, coordination among the agencies that oversee all these parts is as much of that solution as any of it.
In the end, it's about the people, right?
And in the end, it's about the people. Bring down injuries and fatalities in any way we possibly can.
Thank you. Sir?
David Wolcock, Michael Baker International, Boston, Massachusetts. A question for Administrator Feinberg. We're talking a lot about funding moving forward. Last week from the House, I believe it was, the Passenger Rail Reform and Investment Act of 2014 emerged after once again a fight over what happens with Amtrak. We have some major investment needs in the Northeast Corridor, but we also have many areas such as the Midwest. We heard a gentleman earlier about the California high-speed rail, Southeast high-speed rail, tremendous amount of high-speed rail investment, passenger rail investment that's wanted. How are we going to move forward if we continue to have these debates over whether Amtrak continues to exist or not?
Right, well, so I think, so first of all, I think it was a good sign that the bill passed last week with such an overwhelming margin, by such an overwhelming margin. I can't tell you when we're going to stop having the fight over whether Amtrak should exist or not. It might not be in our lifetimes. Hopefully it will be. But look, I think increasingly it's, it is, I think, increasingly an argument that is losing steam, right? So even in a moment where we've got Republican control of both houses and increasing Tea Party presence, this is not an argument that I think most people think, you know, suddenly we're going to be without Amtrak in 2 years. So I think it's, I think it is. More and more people understand and recognize the importance of connecting all these places, and that rail is so integral to that. Amtrak's so integral to that. And look, I think Amtrak is sometimes guilty of bringing a little bit of attention on itself, right? And I've been very frank with them, and I think others have been too. It is a wonderful company, a wonderful entity. They provide a service that is irreplaceable. That said, it's important to be, in my opinion, really transparent with the Hill. Talk about where the money's going. Talk about how you're going to reinvest. Talk about how you're going to perform this service up and down the East Coast and across the country. I think they're getting better at that all the time. They work really closely with us. We urge transparency. We've gone to the Hill with them and talked about how we think it's really important to be transparent. So I think we'll have some moments when people who, you know, might not be huge fans of Amtrak in the first place see numbers they don't like, or see parts of Amtrak, divisions of Amtrak, different business entities losing money. But I think it's important to have a really transparent and realistic conversation about it, because ultimately Amtrak provides a service that I think is incredibly important to the country. So kind of a long answer.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Good
afternoon. Hi. I'm Valerie McCall. I'm the Vice Chair of APTA and Chair of the Transit Board Members Committee. But also in my day job, I am the Chief of Government and International Affairs for the City of Cleveland, Ohio. So I didn't want to sit up here and not stand up and say, thank you for the pilot program on local hiring rulemaking. As you all know, I spent a lot of time up at DOT in conversations over the last 10 years about that. Sometimes when we have projects and we have local laws that have local hiring requirements, we cannot implement this. So I just wanted to stand up and say, actually, thank you for that. And of course, we will be submitting some comments. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks. Well, coming back to the theme about it being about the people, obviously APTA has a continuing interest in working to improve coordinated human services transportation, and it involves a whole myriad of interests and overlapping programs. We all talk about project development streamlining, but here's maybe another area where we could have some realignment and simplification. What, in your view, could be done to bring more federal agencies to the table to work in a more coordinated partnership?
Well, the reason we're having, and I have to give kudos to my staff, Henrika Buchanan-Smith and her team at FTA, for pushing forward this Rides to Wellness Summit that we are having on Wednesday, is you're exactly right, Diana. We've been charging up the hill of better coordinating, as I like to say, across our cylinders of excellence, of the available resources we have. And we see a new opportunity for conversation, because the Affordable Care Act created access to health insurance for, hundreds of thousands of families and individuals that continues to grow. But if they can't get to the services that the insurance is providing, then obviously there's, a huge gap in achieving the goal that we want to achieve. So it's our hope that the healthcare industry sees a vested interest in becoming an active part of this dialogue, along with transit providers and along with the federal agencies that are, bringing forward, much of the, regulatory and implementation framework for these things, to say, we have to, get beyond our past, which actually, there was a presentation I heard just recently that made the observation that when you're dealing with the taxpayer dollar, there's an incredible attention to trying to avoid in any way waste, fraud, and abuse. That's just a basic tenet in protecting taxpayer dollars. However, sometimes in carrying that out, you can make the strictures so rigid that then you can't recognize an environment that's changed to serve the very people that these programs are being set up to help. And so the beginning of it is maybe sitting down and having a very lucid and comprehensive discussion about that changed environment and the needs that it creates, and say, what tools do we have? Maybe we have all the tools, we're just not using them right. We're not putting them together in the right way. So that's where we're going to start. And I think it's incredibly important that the folks we are bringing together come to it with the idea that they can be invested in the solution. And that this isn't some top-down thing that the federal agencies are trying to impose. This is really about all of us recognizing that we're not serving the client base that needs our help and that we actually are here to serve. We can do better. Let's talk about the ways to make that happen.
Terrific, thank you. Do we have any more questions from our audience?
We've exhausted everyone.
Oops, I see somebody approaching the microphone. Let's give her a minute.
Good afternoon. My name is Wendy Oberdick. I'm actually a doc, so I'm a subject matter expert, not for transportation, but I'm a physician out of Texas, so since you gave me such a great lead-in. I'm part of a ACO, an Accountable Care Organization for Baylor Scott and White Quality Alliance. We have a regional geographic scope. I'm here as a guest of DART, and my question for you is this: if healthcare can come together and we can get very creative in how we serve the populations, both in getting them to the clinics proactively and building healthcare and decreasing expense, where do we start? So my question to you is, having those conversations is a wonderful idea. Very interested in doing that, but how do you get it started? So for the state of Texas as an example, where would we start?
Well, we're asking that same question, and we recognize, and you hear this theme over and over, but you hear it because it's so true over and over again. It's not going to be the same starting place and ending place for the communities in Texas as it may be for California, as it may be for Boston. One of the things that we have also launched is we have provided funding for some pilot programs. And I'm just looking to Henry to make sure I don't butcher this. There are pilot programs oriented around communities that they themselves are pulling together the cadre of interests that they need to assemble in order to tackle this problem. And so we're providing some funding actually to let the communities themselves get into this definition space of, what's our clients, what's the problem, what are we trying to achieve, what resources do we already have versus what we might need. And we want to essentially fund those conversations. And so we have, how much money?
So we're putting out about $300,000. It's going out through our National Center for Mobility Management. That opportunity is currently on their website. Teams, your application is due by March 27th. So we did think that the perfect place to start is investing in some local areas, having some resources to engage in that dialogue. And from those dialogues, instead of us as the the federal government telling you what the solutions are, maybe you tell us what the solution for your community is, and hopefully through the federal partnership, we'll be able to leverage some resources to invest in some of that. So I'll give you my card and make sure that you're linked into it.
That'd be great. Thank you.
And, just keep tabs on the FTA website after the summit, which again, I'm really excited. That's going to be on Wednesday. We'll be posting summaries of what's happened, next steps that will be coming up, because this is an initiative under the Secretary's larger ladders portfolio that we'll be pursuing for the next several months, certainly.
Sir, your question?
Good afternoon. Todd Lang from the Baltimore MPO. I'm also the co-chair of the APTA Metropolitan Planning Subcommittee. Wanted to see if you had any update on the timing for the transit asset management and safety regulations, and then comment on the delicate dance that needs to occur after that with the states, the MPOs, and the transit providers.
Well, much as I gave my colleague over here from LA I really can't give you a timeline, I can say that both transit asset management and the safety rulemakings are top priorities for FTA. I mean, they're just so fundamental to, on their face, the new responsibilities given to us under MAP 21, but the industry just really needs it, and we work very closely with them. So, working hard, we'll get it out as soon as we can. The point that you made about, the interaction, though, I think is very important, because we've made the case for some time that our transit agencies need to be very much engaged with the metropolitan planning process. Some of them are, some of them not quite as much. Secretary Fox has made it another important part of his objectives is to strengthen the regional planning process generally, but also to ensure that transit and all other parties are clearly on the table. So it really points to getting the notice of proposed rulemaking out actually on our joint planning rule. That actually is, I know that that's undergoing comment now. The comment's closed on the NPRM for the joint policy rulemaking, if I'm remembering correctly. And so that's moving ahead, like a gazelle on the savannah through the rulemaking process. And in the larger scheme of federal rulemaking, that's been trucking along. So that's going to be a very important part once, that rulemaking is out, in terms of the planning foundation for the types of discussions we're going to have to be having. Thanks.
Yes, sir.
John Wetmore, pedestrians.org again. If a major rail passenger project receiving federal funds, about to go to construction, and political changes delay it for 4 years, and the next administration picks it up again.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
What happens to those federal funds? Are they still available? Does it start back from square zero? What are the rules?
So don't be so pessimistic. Unless you're probably trying to get the money, though, so you're interested. So we're doing our best to make sure that everything that can possibly be obligated is obligated, which is our job to do. There's a deadline on that. We're not sort of scooting things under the across the border. We have a deadline for obligation, and so we will be obligating those funds. I can't speak to what could possibly happen later, but I think the closer you get to building these projects and having them completed, I think the more people are invested in them and the more people are excited that they'll come to fruition. So I'm hopeful that regardless of what happens, we'll be in good shape.
All right, last call for questions. You've been a wonderful audience, and please join me in thanking Acting Administrator McMillan and Feinberg on behalf of APTA and all our memberships. We appreciate your candor and the time you've dedicated to come here and show us how the federal government can partner with us for a better tomorrow, so that our postcards will be ones of positive messages and sent. So thank you so much. Appreciate it.